We are going to talk today about retail media and how we think that retail media can help drive brands. And we actually think that every little touch point can help in driving brand performance. Hopefully some of you have seen this outdoor execution, which Tesco ran around Pancake Day. I think a brilliantly creative execution for Tesco, where obviously they flipped the whole idea, but using the distinctive assets that Tesco has built over the last however many years, and a really creative, timely, relevant message as a consequence. We also want to flip something today. So we want to flip the idea, the misperception. So the misperception that people think that retail media is just a short-term sales driver. We think it does that, and we think it does that brilliantly well, but we think it can also do so much more than that. And soon, Nestlé and Open Mind, the media agency, are going to talk some examples about how Nestlé have done that over the last year or so. So lots has been spoken about the changing customer journey in this ever-changing world of media. So media is hyper-fragmented, as we know. I've even heard people use the word atomized in the way that people consume media. We all know that those traditional ways of building brands are being diminished, and reach is much, much harder to achieve through some of those channels. So the way that advertisers need to build brands, if they're using advertising to build brands, is definitely evolving and definitely changing. And we also know that advertising profitability takes time. It's not something that you generate impact immediately in the short term. Certainly not if you want to think about the total impact of advertising performance. And I'm pretty certain that everyone in this room will have read The Long and Short of It, which is a brilliant piece of work, which demonstrates how advertising does work in both the short term and the long term. Another piece of insight that I'd strongly recommend that people look at, if you haven't, is Profitability 2, which is ThinkBox's research done in conjunction with Group M and also Game Theory, which looks at how advertising works over both the short term and the long term. It's a meta-analysis of hundreds upon hundreds of market mix models across different categories. And the good news is, particularly at Advertising Week Europe, is that advertising works. So it does drive profit. So in the short term, and by the short term we mean a quarter, we don't mean today or tomorrow, we mean a quarter, it delivers an average profit of £1.90. And it's only when you look at the longer term that advertising's full impact is actually generated. So we're looking at £4.10 on average. That's on average, but then if you look at FMCG, which I think is probably really important for everyone in this room today, and certainly is for us, that continuum's even starker. So on average, most advertising for FMCG brands is not profitable in the short term. It's only in the long term where you start to see impact of £1.50. So I think that's really important when we think a couple of things. So number one, how can retail media demonstrate that it is actually working in the short term? Because that's probably quite rare amongst all the different channels that an advertiser could potentially use. But also, we need to ensure that we're really genuinely assessing the full impact of brand advertising performance. And therefore, we're adopting and adapting the way that we measure brand impacts accordingly. I think there's lots of chat in the market about how brand building is changing. So a lot of evidence that multiple exposures across channels can be as effective, if not more effective, than a single exposure with a lead channel. So if anyone's read Dr. Grace Kite's work, Lots of Little Routes to Modern Brand Building, that's a really interesting piece of research which demonstrates that. Tom Roach is talking about how big advertising needs to think small. And even examples that we've run ourselves. So we recently did some research with Lumen, the attention company, and that clearly demonstrates that multiple exposures in our in-store environment across different formats drives more attention than if you don't have multiple formats on the plan. And more importantly than attention, it also drives brand measures as a consequence. So brand consideration and brand awareness, spontaneous brand awareness, increase when people use multiple formats. And I think, and this is I guess one of our key points of our presentation today, which the guys are going to talk about in a second, is that there's often a bit of a myth about retail media. It's often talked about as a channel. I don't think it is a channel. I think it's a series of different touch points that brands can use and have got at their disposal. So we have over 20 that you can use from sofa to stall, all of which can help build your brand in different ways. And we'll show you some examples of what we mean by that. So First one is that we like to think of retail media as an ecosystem rather than a channel, as I've just said. We need to think about the context in which we're advertising. So it delivers a really high quality environment for advertisers to reach their customers. And we also know that creative consistency across the funnel is really, really important in driving performance. So a quick chart on each of those, then I'll ask the team to come up. So first one is we absolutely think that the days of a funnel and a very linear funnel and thinking about retail media as a channel are no longer correct. We should think about it as a series of signals that are derived from data and derived from audience insight. And therefore, it can generate a really sticky role across a total marketing plan rather than be seen at one particular stage of that marketing plan. So let me give you some examples. So that could be you're trying to acquire customers. So how might you use propensity science to think about who's going to be a new customer in your particular category? Or you could use behavioural science if you wanted to drive impact at that particular moment in time. So lots and lots of different ways that you can think about how the data can actually drive insight, which can then be the sticking glue for your whole plan. I think it's also really important to think about the environment in which people are receiving these messages too. So if anyone's seen the Kantar Media Reactions Report, it's a global survey, last year point of sale was recognised by customers as the most influential channel for them. And it was perceived to be incredibly relevant, perceived to be helpful, and also perceived to demonstrate that a brand has great presence in store. So I thought it was really interesting that a channel like point of sale could perform a brand message like that. It also meets customer needs. So we have a survey called the Media Consumption Survey, 10,000 customers every single year. And those retail media channels are perceived to be incredibly helpful in navigating choice for customers in that environment. And so much choice is still made in that particular environment. And of course, it's brand safe. So it's brand safe in an environment that people trust and love within a retailer. And finally, and as we get on to what Nestlé are doing in this space particularly, I'd like to talk about the importance of creative consistency. So we talk about the sofa to store. So we talk about how we can reach customers when they're in consideration mode at home, all the way through to influencing them at the point of purchase. And this is an example from a recent launch from KitKat Blocks. Great products, doing incredibly well, I hear, Penelope. And you can see how not only is there a wonderfully consistent message from KitKat across those different touch points, but it's also been adapted where appropriate for the different platforms. So it could be CTV at home, when people are consuming at home. It could be on the way to the store. So we wrapped an express store in Birmingham to try and encourage people and prompt people before they went into the store. Or it could be media in-store or an online environment to drive that particular purchase at that moment in time. So that's one example, which I think hopefully we'll hear a little bit more about in a minute. I'd like now to introduce our panellists onto the stage to unpack that a little bit more and give their view on whether retail media really can drive brand performance. So Stacey Gratz, who is the Sales and Marketing Director at Tesco Media, will host the panel. And she'll be joined by Penelope Stofaropoulou, who is the Senior Media Lead at Nestlé, UK and I. And Catherine Ponzato, who is the North Cluster Lead Open Mind for Nestlé. So thank you, guys.
Thanks, Nick. Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Thanks so much for being here with us today. So as Nick said, retail media is not just a channel. We look at it as a bunch of different touch points. And the piece that stood out the most that we're talking about more this year is how it can be a brand building activity as well. So it's seen, overall retail media is seen as a powerful part of the marketing mix. Penelope, from Nestlé's point of view, what excites you most about its potential to deliver on the broader brand building objectives?
Thank you. So retail media is definitely a very exciting frontier of the marketing landscape as it allows us to reach, as we've seen just now with the KitKat example, the consumer across critical touch points of the purchase journey. What excites me the most in this new reality is the how we use the data to drive brand awareness and consideration and purchase intent to deliver the sales to the business, but not looking at those immediate sales.
And when you're thinking about that, how has Nestlé positioned itself to unlock that potential effectively? We work quite closely with you, so we know all the work that goes on behind the scenes, but it'd be great to hear how you've sort of positioned yourself.
So we have recognized the power that retailers' data hold for advertising, and retail media has become a key agenda point across global zone Europe and market teams. We have very clear strategies and strategic approaches that filter down to the market level with dedicated media leads and retail media personnel that drives those agendas and those strategies for our brands. And then when we look at what we do here in the market with you guys is we have adopted a full funnel approach where we have moved away from activating ad hoc in an ad hoc manner, the retailers' data, your data, for campaigns here and there, but moving towards having a view of the full year of where we're having full funnel campaigns or not.
Yeah, and you're definitely leading the market in that way, in those ways of working. It's so nice to be having those conversations earlier in the planning process.
Yeah.
So Catherine,
hi.
Hello.
Hi.
With retail media evolving, do you see greater opportunities to integrate its data and touch points? I mean, Penelope talked quite a lot about data with the traditional brand and performance metrics.
So I think for performance, we've definitely seen that at scale as well. And I think that's due to the accuracy and the complexity of the data. It enables us to really drill down, and we can target lapsed customers. We can target customers that are buying our competitor products. We use that data and put it into our planning tools. And so far, we're seeing great returns on that. And but I think where it gets interesting with performance specifically is when we look deeper into that data, and we see we test some hypotheses that we probably didn't think were true. So one that always sticks in my head is we were looking at people who buy really healthy kind of protein products, myself thinking I'm super healthy, and actually the assumption that they're going to have a really healthy basket doesn't really play out, and they actually have a higher propensity to have something a bit naughty or something that isn't quite right. And on first reading, that really jarred, and I was like, well, why is that happening? But with closer inspection, it was just that whole cheat meal playing out in the weekly shop. And actually, we've collated more and more of these insights to build a true understanding of our customers, and then activating against those to drive performance. So I think we've got a lot of experience that retail data is really helping us in the performance arm. But I think the opportunity for brand is even greater. And I think if you look at some of the best, pitches, if you look at some of the best campaigns that win at Cannes, etc., when you look at channel planning for brands, the best brand campaigns all come from a really valuable insight. And I think we've seen from what Nick said and what Penelope's been talking about in the data, we know that retail media offers us some kind of gold standard in terms of data and insights. So to do a great channel plan, you need a great insight. But I think before you can truly embrace brand planning, we need to face into that tension that retail media has. And that's, you kind of had this poster child of your full loop measurement, okay? And that's your major selling point and your unique selling point, and that's great. But I think it kind of does retail media a disservice to a degree, because it doesn't account for the sales that are happening, dare I say it, outside of Tesco. And I think with your increasing broadcast touch points, you're having more and more impact in this space. And I don't just mean like the top of your funnel where you are creating partnerships with CTV platforms, or social platforms, or digital out of home. I don't actually mean that, because then we might get into the tricky, murky discussions of match rates, and is it robust enough, and is it equalized? That's a journey. But I'm just talking about and this might be a bit old-fashioned, but good old bricks and mortar, and the advent of your stores becoming, they're having a renaissance, a new digitalised formats, scan as you shop. It's a huge, impactful experience, and it's in context as well. So if you've got, and I'm going to get it wrong now, but like 23 million club card holders, Julia, is it 23? 23 million club card holders. And they go to a store once a week at least, right? At least, because some will go many times more. They're going 52 weeks a year, 23 million customers are going in the store, spending time in the store. That is a huge brand opportunity in a brand safe environment, like Nick said. So I think the opportunity for brand building is huge and underestimated, and can't just be measured by your closed loop, which is fantastic and great for some of our performance. But we need to start having a different conversation about that measurement.
Agreed, and I think we're going to get into that a little bit later, but completely agree. And so with all this, and it sounds like retail media is sitting across multiple functions within the agency. How are you facing into this?
Yes, it's quite a challenge. I think there are three ways we're facing into it. One is through pure education. So I think gone are the days when you can throw a new emerging area over to the specialist or over to our e-com team. We are raising the floor, teaching all planners about retail media. It's everybody's business, and everybody needs to learn about it. And we've kind of got this attitude at Open Mind where we want to add retail media to what we call the planner's toolkit or the colour palette, so that there is a muscle memory that we use this data and we use this approach every time we pull together a plan, and it isn't reserved for the end of the plan or the edge of the plan. So there's an education piece, number one. Number two, I think it's around changing the way things have always been in the way we work. So I think breaking down the silos, yes, but what's been really interesting working with Penelope and Emma Magliocchi, otherwise she'll fire us both if we don't give her a shout out, the Marcoms team at Nestlé, is breaking down the silos of the traditional areas that retail media has played in, whether that be the shopper marketing team, whether that be the below the line, above the line agency, the creative agency. And I think Penelope especially has been great at being kind of co-pilots with us in conducting that, because it's quite a spiky area, if I'm honest, and there are legacy relationships, there are complex relationships, right? I can't pretend as a media planner that I understand the variables and the challenges that the sales team have or the shopper marketing teams have. And so the Marcoms team at Nestlé and ourselves at Open Mind have been very, very clear that we need to keep communication open and learn from each other and accept that some of us might operate in spaces we haven't before, and to let us. And then the last area, I say this a bit cheekily, is a bit of the culture at Open Mind and Group M more broadly, right? Because e-com has traditionally sat at the bottom of the funnel. We have got some of the most incredible industry-leading experts within that field. And it's that cultural shift of allowing, like even today, asking me and Pete to come on stage and not Al and some of our e-com teams. I mean, they were quick to point out it was April Fool's Day and told me, is that a joke that you're on stage talking about retail media? I was like, it's after 12, exactly, I pointed that out. But it's that, I mean, we say it all in jest, but it is that cultural shift that we want everybody to be talking about retail media, because it's not a specialist function at all. And it's not a channel on the plan. It's a channel, I think Emma at Tesco has said this, it's a line within every channel on every plan. So.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it on our side as well. I mean, we have a brief right now that has color coding against each element of who within the client is funding it. So, which is totally new. I've worked in media for 20 some odd years, and I've never seen that, where you have so many different groups that wouldn't normally work together, coming together and having to color code who's paying for what, because it just doesn't sit in that central budget line.
And they're really protective of it as well, right? And which is bizarre if and the way you break that down is we're all just trying to sell more stuff.
Yes.
So if that's our KPI, our joint KPI, then we should be less trying to pull on, the pink bit's mine, the yellow bit's yours, or whatever.
And we're still figuring it out, because that's one way of doing things, and it's quite interesting when you mentioned it earlier. But yeah, I think this is a huge thing that all of us are trying to understand and find how we bring those teams together, how we come together from a client perspective, but also with our agencies and you guys as partners.
Yeah, it almost feels like the early days of social, if anyone remembers that. That was a long time ago. So why don't we talk about a campaign we all loved and are so proud of, is the Purina. I'm saying that with my American accent. I think it's Purina. The Purina campaign. So what role did Tesco customer data play in enhancing the plan alongside some of the more traditional brand building channels?
Of course, yeah. Data was at the heart of this campaign. It's a campaign, for me, one of its kind. It was the first ever campaign we've done trying to test the data across the funnel and really set the foundations of a year-long approach we have now. So with Purina, we see here our hypothesis was to understand the value of the Tesco data against traditional media buying audiences and to measure the incremental impact that delivered. It was brilliant, the results. We saw a great consideration and purchase intent uplift, and we really proved that it does work building that brand equity using retailers' data for our campaigns and then driving the consumer through the funnel and really getting to the point where we're exploiting then that brand equity. A huge success for us, and the first ever campaign, as I said, it was amazing.
Yes, we're very proud of it. Well, this question's for both of you. So following what seems to be a promising campaign with Kit Kat and with Purina, what's sort of the next step for you in terms of your retail media journey, and how are you think about connecting it to your broader strategy and planning objectives? And you talked about this a few minutes ago, but maybe just what are you thinking about what's next? We've been a part of that as well, but I'd love for you to tell everyone what you're working on, because you are pretty advanced compared to some of the other brands we're working with in this area in terms of how you've organized yourselves.
Thank you. I'll take that. Okay. I guess the one thing is that we are now live with Kit Kat blogs.
Yes.
Which is we've built on the success of Purina One. Are using against the Tesco data. We're looking at the Tesco sphere again and the insights and feeding into this campaign that's now live. And the exciting bit and very new to this as well is that we're talking about an NPD, which is brilliant. So we are live now, building upon the learnings of Purina One. Initial results are very positive, so I'm looking forward to seeing the final ones. But then from a macro level, as I said before, we have that full year now view of how our partnership looks like when it comes to more thoughtful and considered activations in terms of like where we use the data in full funnel manner, from like above the funnel down to lower funnel activities, which we didn't have before. It was more ad hoc, more an afterthought. Now it's something we think at the start of the retail data and how we bring it into our marketing activities.
Anything you would like to add?
I think where we want to get to together is using those deeper insights that we touched upon to drive more interesting and differentiating work. Because I think when you really spend time, again, like I said earlier, looking at those different hypotheses, that's when you find a difference, right? Because actually the optimizing part, the conversion part, the bits the machines are going to own, already own, is hard to differentiate and to drive a competitive advantage, but actually looking deeper at the data and finding those interesting gaps where you have opportunity. So, from simple things, we've done recent analysis about how people shop online, And not just the obvious, you know, on a Monday, the volumes of shopping on Tesco.com go through the roof, makes sense. The beginning of the week, people are on autopilot. The amount of time they're spending doing that shopping list and buying is not very high. But actually, if you look on a Thursday, the time they're spending is a lot greater. So what's happening there? Is it the same customer? It's definitely a different mindset. So then what happens then, and how does that play out creatively? Because that can be a really interesting question. It might offer a completely different creative approach than it would otherwise. So I think, and that's just one example that just popped into my head, I don't know why. And with your Whoosh data as well, really interesting concept. And how are people behaving and how can we use that? So I think definitely using your data to deliver more differentiating work is number one. Number two, we touched on briefly already, which is the way we're set up and being those conductors and inviting people to work together that traditionally haven't. And that can be quite uncomfortable and create some uncomfortable conversations, but it can be really rewarding when you get through those conversations and you understand you've all got the same KPI. And I would say probably agreeing up front the measurement and the value and what you're all looking after,
and
because
yeah.
the objective. Because I think where we need to be, where the agency can add value to, is understanding the incrementality of retail media outside of the closed loop, and understanding whether the juice is worth the squeeze, whether the premium for the data is right for that product, is right for that campaign. And I think that's the next stage in our journey, in testing and learning where it needs to happen and where we can afford not to.
And I would say also from the Tesco side, we now have the Tesco category team involved as well, so that everything we're doing in media is aligned to that to Nestlé's overall strategy with Tesco, which has kind of given us a bigger picture as well. So we've only got a little bit of time left. Let's, I guess, before we wrap up, what advice would you give to media teams looking to harness retail media for both their performance and their brand building activities?
Yes, collaborate closely.
Yes, definitely.
It's very important that we come together, bring you guys really early on the journey.
Been a game changer.
The data, the insights feed into even the briefing point when you're deciding on the audiences and when you're going, you know, what you're going to do. And then, of course, as the guys plan it, work collaboratively with you guys, because you're an extension of our team.
Yeah,
really.
We've definitely felt that as well with both campaigns.
Yeah.
Working closely with the Marcoms team, working together with all those component parts is definitely an important point. And I think I'd advise building in more time than you think you're going to need is also an important point, because coordinating all those various opinions and expertise and understanding is challenging. So I'd build
lots of alignment.
Lots of aligning.
Yes.
Yeah, and capturing what was discussed, because that often gets forgotten as well when you walk out the room, I think.
Ultimately, I think what is important is that with this discussion, we understand that retail digital media is not anymore an afterthought. It needs to be considered at the very start and be part of our wider marketing ambitions and initiatives and be discussed as such. So yeah, not have it as an afterthought.
That's the perfect place to end. Thank you. And thank you for your partnership. It's been great. So hopefully next year we'll be talking about even more activities. Thanks everyone.
So much. Thank you.